So a big political day. We've got the Whitehall correspondent of The Sun standing by and a stamp duty expert to talk through the whole thing. Earlier today, Angela Rayner admitting she may have underpaid tax.
I took expert counsel advice on all of my affairs to ensure that everything was done proper, and that expert counsel said that the advice that I received was inaccurate because of the trust. I don't own the property, that is true. I only own one property that is mortgaged, like most people. But because of the nature of the trust that was set up by the court, that I would be liable to pay the additional stamp duty. As soon as I knew that that was the case, I have alerted and referred myself to the independent advisor on the ministerial code to ensure that they can look transparently at what's happened, and also contacted HMRC to say that there is additional tax owing on this and that I'm prepared to pay that and fully comply with the HMRC as well.
Angela Rayner speaking in her office there at the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. Remember, she is the Housing Secretary as well as the Deputy Prime Minister. She was speaking to Sky News there. A short time later in Prime Minister's questions, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, defended her.
In relation to the Deputy Prime Minister, she has explained her personal circumstances in detail. She's gone over and above in setting out the details, including Mr. Speaker, yesterday afternoon, asking a court to lift a confidentiality order in relation to her own son. She has now referred herself to the independent advisor. That is the right thing to do. But I can be clear, I am very proud to sit alongside a Deputy Prime Minister who is building 1.5 million homes, who is bringing the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation, and who's come from a working class background to be Deputy Prime Minister of this country.
Well, Sophia Sleigh is the Whitehall correspondent of The Sun. Sophia, I wonder if you could just take us through this. Just tell us, because it's such a complicated story, where is Angela Rayner now? Has she done anything wrong? And what are the consequences of this, in your opinion?
So, sort of in summary, basically, we had a great story in the Sun on Sunday paper very recently that sort of revealed that she had bought a new home down in Hove on the south coast. This, in and of itself, obviously there's nothing wrong with doing that, but it prompted a load of questions because she had, number one, her Ashton-under-Lyne property, which is her constituency property, family home. Number two, she has access to a Grace and Favour property, Admiralty House, which is in central London, and then she had this new property in Hove. So there was all these questions for a couple of weeks, a few weeks over, you know, where was she registered for her first and second home, for stamp duty purposes, for council tax purposes, and throughout all that time, we were basically been told that, you know, she hadn't done anything wrong, and there were sort of no questions to answer. It rumbled on. The media, we all kept asking questions. There was a brilliant report, I think, in the Telegraph that suggested it looked like she may have been able to swerve a sort of stamp duty surcharge worth up to £40,000, which is a lot of money. Today we had this huge bombshell where she's admitted that effectively that is what's happened, but where the questions lie are the intention, right? So she sort of said, she's explained it, that she had this property in a trust, her constituency property in a trust that was put in for her child. And she said the legal advice she took at the time said that that was fine. She wouldn't have to pay this stamp duty surcharge on the second home, or third home actually, in Hove. After the scandal sort of was really quite engulfing her, she sought fresh new legal advice, which now says, hold on, we actually think you do owe that £40,000 stamp duty surcharge. She's referred herself to the Sleaze watchdog. Not a great look. Not a great look for someone who was, you know, the sort of Sleaze finder general under the, you know, the Tory administration.
She criticised many Conservatives. Certainly she was seen as sort of Labour's attack dog in order to do that. How much risk is there politically to her position, Sophia?
I actually think this could have done irreparable damage to her brand, to her political career. You know, she's long rumoured to want to be Prime Minister and want the top job. She's very popular with the membership, but, you know, as someone who sort of, you know, prided herself on being you know, the sleaze buster and going after all these Tories, she's really undermined when she's facing allegations of tax dodging. It's not a good look, and I think it's a really bad look for the Labour Party as well. You know, they came into government, Keir Starmer came into government promising to sort of do away with all this sleaze, and they really went for the Tories over sleaze. And I think we're now in a kind of case of those in glass houses. You know, she was always having to go at the Tories, you know, do as I say, not as I do, that kind of stuff. And I think we're just seeing them fall into this trap time and time again. You know, there was a sort of a scandal with a housing minister who, you know, was accused of sort of unscrupulous practices with her tenants.
Yeah, the homelessness minister, Rishanara Ali. This doesn't get better. It's a scandal-hit department. Sophia, thank you. That's Sophia Sleigh there, Whitehall correspondent at The Sun. Thanks to Dawn in Chelmsford, who says, "Hi Peter, I find it amazing Angela Rayner can just find £40,000 for unpaid tax. Perhaps it's down the back of her settee." Well, we don't even know if she's paid it back yet. We don't think she has, because she's going through all this with lawyers from HMRC, Revenue and Customs. Sean Randall's with us now. He's an independent stamp duty advisor. Sean, you must have been watching this story develop, and was it all a bit predictable to see what has happened now? And what would you advise a client in Angela Rayner's position to do?
Okay, it wasn't at all predictable. So a lot of focus initially was on whether Hove was her main residence. And if it had been, or if it was now, which it isn't, but if it was, then this problem wouldn't have arisen at all, because she would have accessed an exception to the higher rates for replacing her main residence. However, that's not the case. So everything turns on whether she knew or ought to have known that for stamp duty, she was assumed to have still owned the property in Ashton by virtue of her son being under 18 and entitled to occupy under the terms of the trust. Now, she was advised in relation to stamp duty, I'm sure, on her purchase. It forms part of the purchase process. So far, we don't know which firm acted for her on her purchase. We do know that a firm called Shoesmiths, which is a city law firm, acted for her in relation to setting up the trust. And, you know, it would be reasonable for the same firm to have acted for her both in relation to the disposal of Ashton into the trust and also the acquisition of the property in Hove, although we don't know that for sure. But someone has missed something.
Just to say, Kieran Stacey, who is of The Guardian, one of the political correspondents, said Shoesmiths has confirmed it was not the firm which advised Angela Rayner to pay the lower amount of stamp duty on her Hove flat. We still don't know who did and why, and The Guardian has asked the question.
Okay, so that's really important. I didn't know that. So now...
That's just emerged in the last few minutes. There's no reason why you would have known that.
Thank you, yeah. So the focus then should be on Angela in trying to find out why she didn't tell that firm what happened in relation to her disposal of Ashton. And, you know, look, the stamp duty rules are complicated. The particular rule that we're talking about, the one that's hurt Angela in question, is a deeming rule. It's an anti-avoidance rule, ironically. It's pretty obscure. It wouldn't be at the front of mind of any high street conveyancer if a high street conveyancer was used. But nevertheless, relying on legal advice in isolation isn't normally a defence to a penalty for carelessness.
Well, certainly, as any first-year law student will tell you, one of the main principles of the law in this country is ignorance is no defence, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And so I think in order, one of your questions was what should she do? Mm-hmm. And I think what she should do is consider publishing the advice that she received. And, you know, the advice or the instructions rather that she gave the law firm to show whether in fact the law firm knew or ought to have known of her son's entitlement to occupy the property in Ashton. Because, well, if a penalty is imposed for carelessness, that's quite a big deal.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what led to Nadeem Zahawi retiring or being sacked. So really, the question is whether she took reasonable care in instructing her law firm.
Yeah, okay. So, Sean, that's really helpful. You've really illuminated that issue, and thank you for your expertise. I really appreciate it. Sean Randall there is an independent stamp duty advisor.